What if I told you that the reason you're still unhappy isn't because of your job, your relationship, or your financial situation? What if it goes deeper into the very fabric of how you've been taught to think about life, suffering, and even yourself? Most of us live in a world where we're told that happiness is just around the corner, one more achievement, one more purchase, one more fix away. And yet, no matter how much we do, buy, or succeed, we still feel empty. This isn't just a personal failure. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, discovered something groundbreaking. The modern world has misunderstood the very nature of happiness. And we're going to unpack that right now, because understanding his insight might just be the key that unlocks the life you've been chasing all along. Seligman's journey begins not where you'd expect. He didn't start out as the happiness guy. In fact, his early work focused on learned helplessness, a condition in which people believe they have no control over their lives, even when they do. Sounds familiar? When we go through repeated failure, heartbreak, or rejection, we start to internalize a dangerous lie that nothing we do matters. And once that belief sets in, we become passive, numb, and hopeless. This is the silent epidemic behind why so many of us feel stuck, even when we appear successful on the outside. But here's where it gets wild. Seligman realized that just as helplessness can be learned, so can hope. And that flipped the entire field of psychology on its head.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Why don't we feel happy even when our lives seem fine? Because we've been sold the wrong model of happiness. We think happiness is pleasure or the absence of pain. But Seligman says that's a trap. Pleasure is fleeting. It's chemically satisfying but emotionally empty. And pain is inevitable. So if your happiness depends on avoiding pain and chasing pleasure, you'll never win. You'll live in constant anxiety, always running from discomfort, always chasing the next dopamine hit. True happiness, Seligman found, comes not from pleasure but from meaning, engagement, and connection. It's about living a life that feels worth living, not just one that looks good on Instagram. And that is a radical shift. Because it means happiness isn't something you pursue, it's something you practice. Here's where it gets truly philosophical. Seligman's model of well-being, the PERMA model, stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Notice how none of these are dependent on external conditions. They're not about what you have, but how you relate to what you have. It's not about having the perfect partner, it's about being present and authentic in the relationships you already have. It's not about chasing your dream job, it's about finding flow in what you do right now. This is where psychology meets existentialism. Because what Seligman is really saying is, you are responsible for the quality of your experience. Not your boss, not your past, not society. You. And that's both terrifying and liberating. So I want to ask you something that might stop you in your tracks. Are you living a life that's truly yours? Or are you just coping, surviving, performing? Are you genuinely engaged with your life, or are you just scrolling through it? Seligman's work urges us to stop chasing a fantasy and start cultivating a foundation. Because real happiness isn't about escaping suffering, it's about building resilience through purpose. It's about choosing to participate in your own life, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. because that's where transformation begins. So if you're still unhappy, maybe it's not because something's wrong with you. Maybe it's because you've been trying to solve the wrong problem. And that's the insight that changes everything. The trap of learned helplessness, how you're unconsciously sabotaging your own happiness without even realizing it. There's a quiet, invisible force that shapes the way you wake up in the morning, how you react to failure, and most importantly, how you see yourself. It's called learned helplessness, and Martin Seligman discovered it by accident. He was studying dogs in behavioral experiments, shocking them mildly in a cage from which they couldn't escape. At first, they tried to flee, but when escape proved impossible, something terrifying happened. They stopped trying. Even when the cage door was opened later, they didn't move. They had learned that their actions were meaningless. And Seligman realized humans do the same thing. We internalize failure. We begin to believe that effort is pointless. And once that belief takes root, it doesn't matter how many doors are open, we won't walk through them. Here's the scary part. You might be doing this right now without knowing it. Think about the areas in your life where you feel stuck. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your mental health. Have you ever caught yourself saying things like, "That's just how I am," or "Nothing ever works out for me," or even worse, "Why bother?" That's not realism. That's conditioning. That's learned helplessness whispering in your ear. And it's dangerous because it becomes self-fulfilling. When you stop believing that your actions matter, you stop taking action. And when you stop taking action, your life doesn't get better, confirming your belief that it never will. Do you see the loop? But here's the philosophical twist that makes Seligman's work so powerful. He didn't stop at diagnosing the problem, he found the antidote. And it's learned optimism. Just like helplessness is learned, so is hope. This isn't toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about retraining your brain to interpret setbacks differently. Optimistic people, Seligman found, don't avoid pain, they frame it in a way that keeps them empowered. When something bad happens, they don't say, "This is who I am." They say, "This is what happened, and I can respond." That one shift from identity to circumstance is the difference between despair and resilience, between staying stuck and growing stronger. Let's get practical. Seligman developed what he calls the ABCD method to teach people how to challenge their own self-defeating thoughts. A is the adversity, the thing that went wrong. B is your belief about it. C is the consequence, how you feel and act. But then comes the game changer, D, disputation. You challenge the belief. You ask, is this really true? What's another way to see this? And finally, E is the energization. What new possibilities emerge when you stop believing the worst? This isn't just a psychological trick. It's a philosophical practice. It's the art of reclaiming authorship over your own narrative. Because every time you dispute a limiting belief, you reclaim a little more of your freedom. So here's my question to you, one that only you can answer. Where have you given up when you didn't have to? What part of your life have you quietly accepted as unchangeable? What if that belief is a lie? What if you've been sitting in an open cage, too used to suffering to realize the door is wide open? Seligman's work invites you to walk out of that cage not with blind positivity, but with deliberate, practiced hope. Because the moment you believe that change is possible, it becomes probable. And that belief, when repeated and reinforced, becomes power. You stop waiting for happiness to find you. You begin to generate it. And that's where real transformation begins, not in some distant future, but in how you choose to interpret this moment, right now. The Science of Flourishing: How to Build a Life That Doesn't Just Avoid Misery But Radiates Meaning, Joy, and Purpose. Now that we've wrestled with the roots of our unhappiness, it's time to turn towards something more radical: flourishing. Not surviving, not coping, not getting by. Flourishing. That's the word Martin Seligman uses to describe a life that isn't just the absence of illness, but the active presence of well-being. And here's where it gets profound. Flourishing isn't about having perfect circumstances. It's about cultivating inner resources so deep, so resilient, so aligned, that even when life breaks you open, something beautiful still grows from the cracks. But to do that, we need to stop asking, "How can I be happy?" and start asking, "What makes life worth living?" Because flourishing is not a destination. It's a daily dance between meaning and presence. Seligman's PERMA model is more than a theory, it's a blueprint. Think of it like the 5 pillars of a meaningful life. Positive emotions are the beginning, not just joy, but gratitude, serenity, awe. They're not shallow, they are the emotional nutrients of the soul. But emotions alone aren't enough. You need engagement, those moments when you lose yourself in something you love. Flow states, deep work, creative immersion. These remind you that you're more than a spectator in life, you're a participant. Then there's relationships, not just having people around you, but being known, being vulnerable, being real. Human connection is not optional. It's the beating heart of everything. Then comes meaning, arguably the most philosophical aspect of all. Meaning is the belief that your life is part of something larger than yourself. It's the antidote to nihilism. It's what gives suffering a dimension beyond pain. When Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust, he didn't ask, "How can I be happy?" He asked, "What can I live for?" And that question is still the gateway to purpose. Finally, we have accomplishment, not for ego, but for growth, for the thrill of becoming, for the quiet pride that comes from saying, "I did something hard and I didn't quit." These 5 elements, when cultivated intentionally, form the architecture of a flourishing life. Not a perfect one, not an easy one, but a real one. Here's where philosophy and psychology collide in the most powerful way. Seligman's research shows that happiness is not a feeling you chase, it's a byproduct of how you live. And yet most of us still try to shortcut the process. We want the joy without the discipline, the fulfillment without the effort. But flourishing doesn't work that way. It's not a mood swing, it's a practice. And like all practices, it requires choice. It requires showing up. It requires asking yourself every single day, am I living in alignment with what matters most to me? And if the answer is no, then you have to do something terrifying. You have to change. You have to let go of the life you've outgrown to step into the one that's waiting for you. So let me leave you with the most important question you'll ever ask yourself. If you stopped trying to be happy and started trying to live meaningfully, what would change? Would you quit your job? Would you call your father? Would you finally write the book, start the nonprofit, forgive the person who hurt you not because it's easy, but because it's right? That's what Seligman's work gives us, not a recipe for happiness, but an invitation to live awake, to stop drifting, to stop numbing, and to start building. Because you're not here to survive life. You're here to create it. And that's not just psychology. That's philosophy. That's art. That's what it means to flourish. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you're here.